After the establishment of the Irish Free State, henceforth known as the State, in 1922 under the Anglo-Irish Treaty, the new government quickly set to try and legitimise themselves as a state. However, both the Catholic Church, henceforth known as the Church, and the State saw this newfound independence from British rule as an opportunity to turn Ireland and its people into a spiritual and national rebirth of a dynamic Christian tradition that was said to have existed in the early medieval period before the English occupation. This partnership of church and state was culturally legitimised and supported, as over 90% of the population of Ireland was Roman Catholic at the time. Due to this, the church had a lot of influence and power over the newer government, which in course gave over control and responsibility of the public education system and health services. This support from both the public and the state allowed then for the church and its agencies to use their influence and power to push all forms of censorship into Irish law. But what is censorship? Censorship of the press and other forms of media can be found and examined on a spectrum. It can be from self-censorship on social media or in a professional setting, formal classifications of pieces of media as they may not be suitable for all age groups, and the suppression of the spread of media products or the discussion of certain topics or opinions that may be deemed dissident of the common good. However, who is it that establishes what has fallen into this category of common good and what is deemed to be a dissident topic or opinion? In most cases, it is often determined by a person or persons who have authority, whether it be governmental or other influential groups. In the case of the Irish Free State, much of what was perceived and decided to be morally good was by the Catholic Church. But what did they want to censor, and how did they do it? The Censorship of Films Act 1923 was introduced by Minister of Home Affairs Kevin O'Higgins. The main outcome of this act was the appointment of a national film censor, the first of which being James Montgomery. Minister O'Higgins intended for censorship to be a reflection on the average outlook of decent, responsible people. Montgomery was a middle-class Catholic, and much of his views and subsequent topics of prohibition reflected that. He would prohibit references to infidelity, divorce, nudity, vulgarity, immorality, blasphemy, and crime, which often left little of the original film. However, there were still many more that wished to extend this censorship into the world of literacy and the press. After much lobbying and pressure from Catholic groups such as the Vigilance Association of Ireland, the Christian Brothers, and many Catholic newspapers and publications, now Minister for Justice Kevin O'Higgins met with a delegation of Catholic bishops in 1928, which in turn led to the establishment of the Committee of Evil Literature. The aim of this committee was to provide a report to Minister O'Higgins, which in turn became the blueprint for the Censorship of Publications Act 1929. This act covered both literature and publications such as newspapers, and aimed to make provision for the prohibition of the sale and distribution of unwholesome literature, and for that purpose to provide for the establishment of a censorship of books and periodical publications, and to restrict the publication of reports of certain classes of judicial proceedings, and for other purpose incidental to the matters aforesaid. However, what was it that the committee, the government, and the church deemed to be unwholesome and immoral, and to what degree? The theory of Hallin's sphere is a useful one to categorise and help explain these. Hallin's sphere is a theory on news reporting and coverage developed by historian Daniel C. Hallin. He first displayed this theory in his book The Uncensored War, published in 1986. In this theory, the topics of political discourse are split into three areas, or spheres. The first sphere is the sphere of consensus. Within this sphere, it contains topics in which there is widespread agreement on and encompasses those social objects not regarded by journalists and most of society as controversial. In the press, journalists do not need to be neutral or present any opposing point of view. These are things perceived to be morally good within a society. The second sphere is the sphere of legitimate controversy. This is the area in which objectivity and balance reign as the supreme journalistic virtues. Journalists are required to seem disinterested and show both sides of the argument and not advocate for one side or the other. The third and final sphere is the sphere of deviance. Topics within this sphere are ones which violate or challenge the political consciousness. When discussing these topics, journalists are encouraged to play the role of exposing, condemning, or excluding. These topics are often categorized as being morally wrong within a society. With these spheres, it can be seen what topics of discussion were considered to be moral and immoral as deemed by the church at the time. Within the sphere of consensus, topics of modesty, marriage between a man and a woman only, generosity, and other things promoting the teachings of the church would be included. Newspapers would often publish sermons by bishops, again perpetuating the importance of their authority. The list of topics held in the sphere of deviance, however, spans much more. As aforementioned, infidelity, divorce, nudity, vulgarity, immorality, blasphemy, and crime were prohibited from films, but also from other publications. The Censorship of Publications Act 1929 makes explicit reference to the censorship to the mention of abortions, miscarriages, and contraception. Newspapers were prohibited from advertising birth control methods or products before their ban, prevention and treatment advice for sexually transmitted diseases and infections, and sexual dysfunction. The reporting of sexual scandals and crimes were also heavily forbidden, as it would have been calculated to injure public morals, and journalists would subsequently have to pay a fine not exceeding £500 or, at the discretion of the court, to imprisonment with or without hard labour for any term not exceeding 6 months, or both such fine and such imprisonment. Topics falling into the sphere of legitimate controversy regarding the church's perspective are far and few between, as much of the legislation casts topics of discussion as either morally right or wrong, with no voice for opposition. The only topics seemingly that could be categorised into this sphere were that of current affairs, such as business, sport, and human interest. These initial censorship acts did little for the growth of Ireland as a new and emerging nation after independence. It tainted communication with the public on the economic, moral, and political lives of the nation for decades to come from a governmental and journalistic point of view. The heavy influence on these acts by the Catholic Church and its agencies helped for the Church as an institution to become a very powerful influence politically and socially for years to come in Ireland. The tight censorship laws were in place to protect the shared interests of the church and state, and to save face on the national and international level, while there was much economical, political, and sexual abuse going on behind closed doors.